I will just double check that we are on air. Let me just double check. Perfect. Right.
Yeah.
So, hi everyone. I'm mindful that we are a little bit early, but welcome to another Q&A. Now, I have just noticed that for whatever reason, it set it as Sarah Cox. This is not Sarah Cox on the stream.
Not Sarah Cox.
You are not Sarah Cox. So what I'm going to do is introduce the person that we are having a Q&A today with, which is Alan.
Hi, Kelly.
Hi, Alan.
Thanks for having me.
So, whilst I change your name, Alan, do you just want to introduce yourself and what ward that you're standing in?
Yeah, my name's Allen Thwaites. I'm standing as an independent candidate for the Warwick ward, and the Warwick ward is basically everything between Burton Road and Dolby Road. So it includes Sandy Lane, Drive, that sort of area.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, guys, I say this on every stream, but you can only vote for candidates that are in your particular ward. Alan has just explained what candidates are in his ward. If you are unsure what candidates are in your ward, simply go onto the Melton Borough Council website and find the name of your ward by inputting your address. We have to get that out of the way because there are multiple people we found. It's like, oh, I put a vote for this person, but they're not in my ward. We found a lot of that with this year's, that people will be like, oh, I want to vote for this person, but they're not in my ward. So format, guys, just to let you know, we're going to do the same format as the others. So we're going to start by discussing Alan and your manifesto. So I've taken this from what you put to the Mountain Manners community group as well. So if you are elected, that you want to fight this current single party control that is in the current council. And one of the things that you mentioned is the waste of resources and money over the vanity projects.
Yeah, that's my words, vanity projects. That's not applicable to anybody.
No.
Anybody. That's one of the two key things with my whole campaign is value for money and making Melton a better place to live in.
Yeah.
And I've never actually sort of been a politician, the council meetings on YouTube, etc.
Yeah.
And just actually see the way the decisions are made, the way the money's going, and it's all a very small amount of people that are actually making those decisions with no debate. And I sort of stood there and thought, well, what can I do as an independent? And until I met people like Sharon, Lee, Bruce, etc., I realised that there was a lot of us that felt the same way.
Yeah.
And so that case actually forcing a debate for people to say, well, why are we spending that money? Have you thought of better ways of doing it? Have you thought of all the different ways of doing this? And at best, we can actually get enough people elected for the first time, I think, anywhere that the number of independents standing, has been, that we can actually control that agenda.
Yes.
And that's not saying we wouldn't do anything that any other party loyal to Melton, or I'm loyal to Melton. That's where I want the benefits to be, not a party. And I'm not going to say anybody else's idea is rubbish just because they come from a particular party.
Yeah.
My loyalty is to Melton.
Yeah.
Does that answer? I mean, the things.
You do bring up a valid point in terms of the quantity of independents across all the wards that are standing this year. And it's something that I've actually looked into in a bit more detail, because you're right. There is enough independents now that if you do all get elected, you can potentially vote. You can potentially run the show. But obviously, with
exactly.
but how would you go about things if there's independents within your group that you don't necessarily see eye to eye on an issue on?
Well, I mean, that's the beauty of being independent. We're here to listen, not just to the Melton people themselves,
Yeah.
but to listen to the independent councillors.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not the keeper of all good ideas. There's nobody's a keeper of all good, and that's what I can see as the biggest difference. Really, is actually saying, well, what is the best for what it is, which is Melton, the borough, and whatever else it is. It doesn't mean we're not going to agree with different people.
No.
And if we do have differences, that's what we've got to talk about.
Yeah.
You've got to talk. So you can't just I have to be careful what I'm saying, but you can't remove people just because they disagree with you.
I always love it when, right. So good points there. Don't worry. There's always. I've been free for free, and there's always been some form of tea spill on the Q&A. So don't worry. We're free for free on the tea count now. You mentioned about fighting to improve the NHS doctors and dental services within the town.
Yeah.
Are you looking for that improvements to also go out to the rural areas as well, where they might be more, one could argue, isolated compared to the town centre?
Yeah, very much. I mean, first of all, we need the doctors. And I agree with some of the previous people you've talked to. It's pointless having a surgery unless you can have the doctors. But it's a lot easier to recruit the doctors to somewhere nice for them to work from or nice for them to go to than it is somewhere that isn't nice, let's put it that way. And yes, putting doctors out into rural or is making it easier for those people to get to those doctors, bringing them into the towns or whatever, and having a town that Melton's becoming a large town, or is going to be over the next 5 to 10 years. You've got to start looking at things like the hospital as well. That needs to be an A&E, or to have an A&E capability. You need to have enough capability within the general GPs to sort of cope with the number of people. And that's the key thing for me, NHS dentist in town. And half of the people I know are going to Oakham to get to an NHS dentist.
Yeah.
Now, they're fortunate in being able to travel to do that. A lot of people aren't.
No.
And so, these are the things that, just to get the basics back, from 10, 15, 20 years ago, those were the basics. Those were the things that you couldn't get back to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we've gone to the next part of your manifesto now, where you mention about how you plan to continue fighting to maintain and improve facilities for the young, elderly and vulnerable residents. Where do you see those improvements going? Like, what's your vision in regards to what those look like?
Yeah. I mean, because that's three really important, into the manifesto. I mean, for the last 10 years, I've been the chairman of the Friends of Gretton Court, which is an extra care facility in town.
Yeah.
And people don't know it, but those that do know it should be held up as one of the star points of Melton for looking after our elderly residents. It's going through some changes at the minute, which I can't talk about too much. But there are changes there which are wrong and need to be changed.
Yeah.
So it's that's the time for the last 11 years or so. Things like the food banks and that Sharon talked about. He's supporting all of the food banks in town. He's not supporting any particular one.
Yeah.
It's a wide, it's a broad brush, and you've got to look at the, across the whole town, across the whole borough, as far as that concerned. On the youth side, that's a massive, massive one. You know, in the fact of like the swimming pool and all the rest of it,
Yeah.
it's investment, and in my simple terms, things like, are we actually helping people to get into organised activities? When I talked to my great nephew and his girlfriend the other day when they were helping the leaflet, that why don't you want to go to the swimming pool, which is actually in my ward?
Yeah.
And they said, well, the gym's too expensive, and the we could have spent the 60k that they spent on consultancy better on doing it up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But won't go into
that. Hang on, let me just get my sip bottle.
That's all right. And things like gyms and that sort of thing, for people under 20, 18, whatever you want to make it, why can't we subsidise some of those joining fees? We've got some fantastic clubs in Melton, class Muay Thai boxing. We've got loads of youth workers that want to work and want to be able to supply things, but can't.
No.
Because they can't get the thing.
Yeah.
And to me, that is great. It's great use of your money to actually enable people to get there. Now, I know organised events don't work for everybody, but surely we can actually provide somewhere for people to meet.
Because it's this whole idea of having another place to meet. Probably, if I take somewhere like Black Dragon, for example, one of the big draws is that people of various different ages, from children all the way up to adults, can meet somewhere and can learn a new game or play cards with each other.
Yeah, and we've got buildings that they could use. Just needs a little bit of help, needs a little bit of fun. People that are willing to do that with the coaches, we're talking football, rugby, any of those events, places like the Edge, whatever, to actually just get that little bit of funding to actually encourage people to get in there. Again, it's not going to capture everybody,
no,
but for people we can help into that sort of arena, it's phenomenal use for the money.
Yeah,
the value of money for money. But that seems to be ignored.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we go on to use of money, which leads on quite nicely into our local issue questions. So just to let you guys know, these are the questions that I ask all candidates. I am mindful that we're leading on to money, so we're going to do the one question before the other one, if that's okay, Alan. So
yeah, no problem.
It's recently been announced that the stockyard received a large portion of money from the town's levelling up fund. Do you agree with this allocation of funding? And if not, where do you believe those funds should have gone?
I'm not against the stockyard, but you've got to take the whole town as a whole. You can't leave out the town centre. You can't put all of your eggs into one basket. You can't be a one-trick pony for things like the food and drink. You've got to broaden yourself out from that. And so there's a whole thing around that, bringing the town forward. Looking at the stockyard and the development plans there, great. But you've got to actually bring the town centre into that. And then there's a lot of things that are problems with that. Well, one is actually getting between the two. You could spend that money making it easier to get from the stockyard into the town centre. One of the great ideas to leafleting, just making simple changes to the crossing.
Yeah, because it's a bit of a double-ended crossing,
Coming
isn't
into
it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so simple things like changing the timing or changing the street furniture a bit, actually making that entrance look pleasant. As though you're actually entering a nice area. I'm not knocking it, but it could be a feature to say
Yeah,
this is the entrance. I feel that things that are happening in the stockyard should also have complementary things in the marketplace. So if they've got things happening in the marketplace. Now I know there's things that we need to work with the town estate
yeah,
around that, but there's lots of other ideas. Things like if you're actually having an event in the stockyard, what about also giving vouchers to spend in town?
yeah,
In complimentary shops or whatever. You've got to encourage that footfall, and that goes both ways. Because if you've got the people in town, because
yeah,
there seems to be two groups of people that will go to the stockyard
yeah,
pre-feature in town, or they will spend time in town but won't go to the stockyard. It's got to be a whole. It's one
yeah.
solution.
You've got to have more of a focus on doing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, exactly, and that's and doing that is exactly what I mean about actually making it easy to get from one to the other as well, and not make it. Oh, I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Onto the whole thing about parking and all the rest of it. You've got to make that as well.
And actually, you have kind of covered the next part of the question in regards to what ideas and strategies you have regarding
Yeah,
getting that marrying of the two, because we do have multiple food festivals throughout the year, and press articles say those food festivals, they're bringing in hundreds, if not thousands, of people each weekend.
yeah, and the town, the shops that we want to thrive in the centre of town are missing out on some of that.
Mm-hmm.
Responsible body, we should be encouraging both sides of that, and making sure that that footfall gets into town. Because to be blunt, to keep those shops alive in town, they need footfall, and
Yeah,
not just on Saturday and Tuesdays. They need it in every day of the
yeah,
week, so that we can have interesting shops, and then that starts to actually snowball
yeah.
into a fact of actually if there's interesting shops to go to,
If there's
I'll
interesting
go
shops, I'm more likely to go
there
there because there's
rather
stuff
than
for me on.
somewhere else. Absolutely, yeah. And I know we're banting about topics, but I mean, it links in with things on parking. You talk to people, well, it's expensive to park, and they can only get away with parking in QD or Aldi for so long, and so they have time to nip into the cattle market, but don't have time to go into town.
Yeah,
We've got to look at ways of actually making it easier, and whether that sort of lines on this. So I can't,
yeah,
don't knock me down. But other things, one great suggestion that was made to me, well, what about like the Iceland car park? If you park in there, you can actually redeem some of that in one of the shops.
yeah,
Again, you're encouraging if people want to park there, not beyond the Bell Centre because that's private, but I mean the
yeah,
other one, the council car park, that there's a voucher on there that you can spend in Wilco's or wherever.
yeah.
Sort of
So,
encourages people into town.
yeah. So they all sound pretty good creative strategies in place. So we're going to move on from that now a little bit, and we're going to talk about voter ID. So I've um just a bit of background for those of you who haven't seen one of the Q&As yet, or haven't seen any of the local election footage as a whole. This year is the first year where voter ID is required to vote in an election. What are your thoughts on this, Alan?
I think you can tell. I mean, I just don't understand. I don't understand. As previous people have said, and put the facts and figures there. What problem are you trying to solve? I think what it was, only 3 people were cautioned. Over a full, and that was the full election. Voter fraud is a big issue. Prevent probably a third of the population from voting. Those that haven't got a driving license yet, and those that aren't IT savvy or aren't driving anymore. There's a whole lot of people there. You're making life difficult, and we need people to vote. We need people to actually have their say, and we're preventing them and spending a lot of money for no real reason other than you think it's a good idea. I mean, it's just difficult to understand where the benefits for this come from, and what it's trying to cure. It just does not make sense to me. And there's lots of people to sort of say, am I missing the point here?
Yeah.
It's something I'm sort of saying. But as Sarah Cox, fantastic points. The numbers just aren't there. And what to me is important, where you need to be putting your time, money, because we're not absolutely sure that they're going to be able to cope when we start to vote. I know in a borough election, the turnout is not massive, but if it was massive, can they cope with all these checks? And that goes without the things that Sharon brought up, things like people having as you can tell, I'm flabbergasted. I don't understand it. Don't understand why we're spending all this amount of money on something that there's no problem to cure.
Yeah. All right. So I know you mentioned a little bit about parking earlier, which now links to the next local issue question I'm going to ask you. So public transport in Melton has been a big topic of conversation when it comes to footfall within the town centre. If you're elected, what strategies would you put in place to help with this particular issue?
But I mean, I think as the others said, unfortunately, it's the county council that have the final control over that. But it's our job to lobby hard for those areas that are needed. But again, coming back for me to the numbers, we need to understand our numbers really, really well to say, where is that transport needed? What times of day? Which routes? So that we can lobby hard and say, these are the facts.
Put the numbers behind the conversation, basically.
Absolutely. Put the numbers behind it and fight with those numbers. Like I said, we seem to have drifted into a lack of infrastructure on transport without actually looking at the numbers, without actually looking at the facts, looking at what we actually need, and that's on the basis of people getting to work, people are going out and enjoying themselves, and our other, hidden topic, which is getting people into town, getting footfall into Melton so that it can come alive again.
Yeah. Brilliant. So, next question. I know you touched a bit about youth services earlier, which kind of leads nicely into the next question. Melton has multiple universities and high quality colleges within the area. So if you were elected, what ideas, plans, strategies would you implement to help attract and encourage these young adults to live, study, and or work in Melton?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll own up to. I went to Melton Tech when it was Melton Tech before it became Brooksby, etc. And then I went on to what is now called De Montfort. It was Leicester Poly when I went. That was a long time ago.
Hey, fellow DMU alumni.
And I've recruited from Trent and Loughborough and Leicester universities and De Montfort University. 6-7 years I've done. I was a drop in my car that I've worked with, from the MV, from Brooksby, and listening to the things, their aspirations and what they want to do. It's things like apprenticeships, things, it's not just going to university, whatever, it's apprenticeships, and it's finding practical jobs. And therefore, there's got to be a link between what the colleges, the local areas are doing, and the companies that are actually coming into town, and the ones that are already here, and what after their development. So it's actually making sure that those are focusing the right way. So working with the colleges. I don't know exactly the thing about Brooksby and Melton and how much is going to Brooksby and how much is in Melton. I believe a lot of it should be in Melton because that's where we keep the money in town and why we're busing people out to Brooksby. But it's that's I'm not an expert on those areas. Brooksby was in my day fantastic for farming. Also fantastic for sport. Keep those students in town. We've got to give them a future. We've got to have the jobs that once they come out of that college or school, MV or school, whatever, that the jobs are there. That's what keeps people here.
Yeah.
And so it's got to be a coordinated effort. So bringing all of those colleges together and sort of working out what do we need as Melton, and then are the colleges provide. We've got to attract new people as well. Yeah. The amount of housing we've got being built, there's got to be those people there as well.
Yeah. So last question before we get to followers' questions, public questions. In your opinion, outside of topics that we've already discussed, what should be a priority for Melton Borough Council within the next 4 years?
I think, to be honest, I think we have actually covered it. The two bits that I've said is I want to get value for money, Adam. I've got to actually look at how we are actually spending that money, how we're actually targeting that money, how we're actually measuring success on that, and not just making promises for things that we can or can't deliver. I mean, I can plan to go to the moon, but unless I've got Elon Musk behind me, I'm never going to make it. So I've lost my thought there a little bit.
We're on the moon. We were on the moon.
Now we've got it back on track. But what it is actually making Melton a good place to live, making sure it's got the infrastructure, making sure, I seem to remember lots of promises, I've got the facts in front of me or whatever, but over the last 10, 15 years, lots of promises about schools, park areas, NHS doctors, and all that, roads, new building estates. Well, we seem to have got all of those, but none of the infrastructure. So it is that key infrastructure, because it's key. If you haven't got that infrastructure, the rest of it doesn't work. So they're the two things that I think, as a group, and me personally, focus on is making it a great place to live and making sure we're actually spending the money we've got, because everybody's short of money. We've got more money.
Right, thanks for that, Alan. So we're now going to go on to audience questions. So thank you, Glyn, for submitting this question prior to the Q&As. Glyn Cartwright goes, a couple of questions for each candidate regarding the proposal to convert 60% of Melton Borough Council's office accommodation at Parkside into a hotel. What are your personal views on that proposal?
Again, how can you actually put a proposal forward to borrow £2 million of money to convert a building into a hotel and then lease it to a hotel company? If they want a hotel here, they'll do their own research and do that. But again, they've done that. If you look at like I did, I watched the council meeting, and the look of shock around that room. One, it became £8 to do it, and then the second one, that when Peter Faulkner asked the question, have you actually asked the hotels, the existing hotels, what the effect on them would be? And you're thinking, well, that's simple, isn't it?
That you think, as someone who teaches business, one of the things I teach my teenage, because I taught business to adults with SEND needs. One of the first things that we do when we go and cover market research is you look at the competition in your market.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and so it boggles me. We sort of come back to the point though that building's 60% empty. But the Borough Council have other facilities all around town. We mentioned Phoenix, Phoenix House. There's things there that could be moved into Park Road.
Mm-hmm.
Phoenix House, but that would be sensible. You've got to look at, well, what can we consolidate into the one building?
Yeah.
The building was oversized to start with, but we have that now. We can't change that. So look at everything we can consolidate into there. If you are going to put a commercial property, or make some of it commercial, there's a lot of things. The enterprise car rental that's currently in Phoenix.
Yeah.
I'm just to the railway station. Some of this, and this is just thoughts off the top of my head. I'm not the expert. I've not been in the council for the last 10 whatever years.
Yeah.
And know that, what could that building be used for without having to change it into something that we don't actually need, and borrow £2 million to do it.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. And this sort of comes back to the whole point on, probably one of the main that came forward. The current way of working within the Borough Council using the cabinet system, so that a few people go off, make a proposal, and then come back in, and because there's a one party group, it then just gets rubber stamped through, and voted for. There was the one occasion where actually people said, actually, this doesn't make sense, and even on part of it. But that's where, like I said, with minimum I can hope that we achieve is that we open debate. Things like that have to be debated on openly, and make sure that we're doing simple. If you maybe want to come and lecture some of them on simple business ethics and business ways of working. I've worked in the commercial for 40 years, and it's knowing what your results are going to be, and and what your profits are going to be, or what your entire costs are going to be.
Yeah,
that's what what the Americans would call that's 101, isn't it? And, that's the first thing. But we seem to point on that.
Yeah. Right. So thanks for that, Alan. So as it stands, no questions have come through. Hello, Dino. So what we're going to do, guys, if you've got any questions to put forward to Alan, please let us know, and we can ask them later on as well. So
Yeah.
once again, Alan, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to answer our questions.
No,
If you've got
it's
any
been an
questions,
absolute pleasure.
yeah. If you've got any questions for Alan, pop them in the comments. And any candidates that would like to have their own Q&A like this chat with me and Alan are able to DM the page at any point with their availability. So, speaking of other Q&As, I will be back live at around 2 p.m. to talk to Helen Cliff, who is one of the candidates that is standing, come on, Kelly, get your words out, for the Labour Party. So I will see you guys at 2 o'clock, and Alan will see you later, I guess.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much.